Okay. Now, I'm going to jump into, and we're going to do a little bit of history first here. It's going to be a fun night. So, we are Kirk's Law Corner and E-Clause LLC. I'm hoping that the animation works better with this new configuration, so we'll see. And Monday Night Law with your hosts, Kirk and myself. That's for us. If you guys want to, send us a personal private donation, that's the best way how to get a hold of us to do that for all the work that we are trying to put together for you guys. We are a lawfully created corporation, and that's us. So we do this with mandatory oversight, hence the consent, mutual consent. Right there's that quid pro quo that we have with our legislators. So, and what we're trying to do is we are trying to get back to this thing, right? The de jure republic. That's what we want, right? So this is exactly how we do that in context of exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And the two jurisdictions I just spoke about, advantage, profit, and gain, that's the stuff inside the triangle. That would be Washington, D.C., and the stuff outside, market, margin, and capital, that's the Commerce Clause. That's all of us in the states. So that's why this representation looks as it does. So I've actually had many questions on that, and I hope that answers that question. So going to dive into the Annals of America, or my favorite edition, Volume 2. We're going to go through a little bit of the rule and rebellion. So, you got to remember, in the First Continental Congress, the short version of this started over taxing tea, right? So just kind of keep that in your mind as we go through this, right? Pinkies up, as you drink your spot of tea. Mm-hmm. So, as I go through this, it'll make sense to you. And so here's our First Continental Congress. The coercive acts were thought to endanger all the colonies. So a Congress was convened in Philadelphia in September of 1774 to decide a course of action. For many delegates, the question was no longer whether Parliament could tax the colonies, but whether it could legislate for them at all. Okay. Enough.
Like, I don't know, maybe we're not even supposed to have statutes.
Exactly. Right.
Right.
So enough radicals such as Patrick Henry of Virginia were present to ensure the defeat of a proposal for conciliation by Joseph Galloway of Pennsylvania. After adopting a Declaration of Rights, an address to the people of Great Britain, and an agreement not to buy or use English goods, the Congress resolved to meet again if their grievances were not redressed. Boy, what does that sound like where we are right now, right?
That's right.
This is the history of convening your legislature, right? And calling them into assembly. So, to be able to go through and go back to the original Continental Congress, this is where this stuff comes from. So in 1773-74, the resistance on the Tea Act, okay, the Tea Act of 1773 was passed by Parliament to save the British East India Company from bankruptcy. The effect of the act would have been to undersell any competition in America and thus benefit both the consumer and the company. This is starting to sound vaguely familiar, doesn't it? American colonials who were in favor of a revolution decided to use this act as to maneuver Britain into a difficult position. Rumors were planted to the effect that the Tea Act created an illegal monopoly This is what I said. Notice a pattern forming here, right? Resistance to the importation of tea was encouraged throughout the colonies, and resolutions against tea importation or imports were drawn up in several ports. It was in Boston that, under the leadership of Sam Adams, the most drastic action occurred on December 16, 1773. American patriots, masquerading as African Americans and Native Americans, raided the ships of the East India Company that were docked in the harbor and dumped the tea into the ocean. Two sets of resolutions against importing tea are reprinted below. I didn't go into this. This is just, giving you the highlights. The resolution of New York Sons of Liberty were the result of a meeting held in late November. Those of the citizens of Philadelphia are dated February 3, 1774, and reinforce a position taken the previous October. So, kind of giving an idea. The idea of challenging monopolies is not an old proposition here. This goes back to the Tea Act of 1773 and 1774. So this is not shift made up by yours truly. This we've done this once or twice in history. So
at least once or twice.
Exactly. So we're going to go into February 5, 1774 here, and the independence of the Massachusetts legislature. The Bay Colony was a leader in the growing resistance to royal authority. The legislature of Massachusetts attempted during 1773 to stimulate intercolonial cooperation through committees of correspondence. Governor Hutchinson contested the determination of the legislature to exercise its prerogative in appointing such committees. In reply to the governor's criticism of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, a committee consisting of Sam Adams, John Hancock, and others submitted the following report on February 5, 1774. And this, of course, was a report, right? Much unlike the weaponized family court report. And it reads, actually, as I went back through it, I started to look at some of the language and was like, God, we have done this before. It was just like, it was almost bizarre, man. I felt like I'd stepped back in time in the Matrix. I mean, it was like, holy crap. So, Lord Dartmouth on securing the submission of Massachusetts. Now, this is where it starts to get kind of a little bit interesting. The cumulative effect of the reports of the colonial resistance to British rule during the winter of 1773 and 74 was to make Parliament more determined than ever to assert its authority in America. The main force of their actions fell on Boston, which seemed to be the center of colonial hostility. General Thomas Gage, Commander-in-Chief of the British Army in America, was appointed Governor of Massachusetts. In the following letter to Gage of April 9, 1774, Lord Dartmouth, the Secretary of State for the colonies, spoke of the ministry's determination to make Massachusetts submit. Again, stop me if any of this is not sounding familiar to you, right? So, Governor Morris against revolutionary enthusiasm. Now, I remind you, there's always at least two sides to an argument. So, Governor Morris of New York feared the social upheaval that would be, be thought likely to occur in the event of a democratic revolution. Oh, here we go again. Democratic revolution, right? Morris was a member of the colonial aristocracy and believed that if the disputes with Britain continue, we shall be under the worst of all possible dominions. the domination of a riotous mob. See anything happening in current events that would strike that nerve there, bro? But when the break with England came, huh?
A few things, maybe.
Right? But when the break with England came, more supported the American cause. The occasion of the following letter of May 20, 1774 to John Penn was a meeting in New York called to consider Boston's proposals to stop all trade with Britain. Right? So this is why I say everything happens for a reason and will end up ultimately being, it goes back to trade, right? Those foreign emoluments, right? So don't mean to get ahead of myself here a little bit, but that's the topic that we're talking about, foreign emoluments, right? So we have a definition in the dictionary that isn't defined. So let's do that, shall we? A proposal for a colonial or for the Continental Congress. Early in May 1774, the Boston Committee of Correspondence sent a circular letter throughout the colonies urging a stoppage of trade with Britain. This appeal was met with a mixed response. In New York, a committee of 51, dominated by merchants, drafted a reply on May 23. While this committee had no desire to halt trade, it was determined to maintain control of the anti-British sentiments of the populace. The reply therefore sympathized with Boston's situation, but implied that only a Continental Congress could suitably handle the matter, right? Would that be they wanted representation, no representation in the process? This is exactly what we're all talking about, right? No representation, right? Taxation without representation, ultimately speaking.
Basically, the people, petitioned with their grievances, and they were just ignored.
Exactly. So to see this happening again in current events, remember, this is Annals of America Volume 2 that these are quotes from.
Right.
So 1774. This particular one from May 23rd, for example. So
I was waiting for you to get to July 6, 1775.
I'll get there. That's why I said I just took some of the cliff notes.
But this is the beginning right here of where the people started coming together and saying, we've got some serious problems here. These guys over there, these jackwagons, are not responding to our grievances, and they're just keep imposing more despotism.
That's right. The bar, British Parliament. I mean, it's the same actors. That's why I said, how many times have we said it, Kirk? It's the same actors pulling the same shit over and over and over again, right?
It is.
So remember, we talk about in the Declaration of Independence, right? Quartering large bodies of, standing armies and all that. So there's actually the quartering act that goes with that declared conduct of a tyrant. Okay. When news of colonial opposition in 1773 and 1774 reached England, Parliament rapidly passed 4 acts labeled by the colonists as the Intolerable Acts. One of these was the Quartering Act of June 2, 1774, which applied to all British America and gave colonial governors the right to requisition unoccupied buildings to house British troops. However, in Massachusetts, the British troops were forced to remain camped on the Boston Common until the following November because the Boston Patriots refused to allow workmen to repair the vacant buildings General Gage had obtained for quarters. So they sensed something was coming, right? So I said they were born at night, but it wasn't last night.
That'd be the erecting a multitude of offices and sending officers to harass our people and eat out our substance.
They're just saying.
Or quartering large bodies of armed troops.
Oh
yeah, that would be a declared act of tyranny, wouldn't it?
They're just saying. So This is why they don't want you guys to learn this stuff, which is specifically the reason I'm teaching you it. So, resolutions against trade with England. The Virginia House of Burgesses, at its meeting of May 27, 1774, had proposed a gathering of delegates in a Continental Congress to discuss British colonial relations. Members of the House were asked to determine the opinion of their constituents on such a Congress. One favorable response came in the form of the resolutions from was that Amber? Oh, Alba Albemarle. Never heard of that name before. County in on July 26. This document, which was drafted by Thomas Jefferson, summed up colonial grievances against Britain and urged a stop on trade. So, let's see, Albemarle. I was going to say, somebody in the comments tell me how to say that, but never mind. You get the idea. So, Thomas Jefferson's summary view on the rights of British America. Now, this is where we're going to start talking about rights, right? Because, we've talked about, their grievances. Now, these people are starting to get pissed. They're like, hey, we've got rights here, right? So, if we're going to talk about our rights, let's know how they did it. So, news of the Boston Port Bill closing and otherwise punishing Boston until it apologized for the Tea Party of the previous December reached Williamsburg, Virginia, in May of 1774. In response, certain younger members of the Virginia House of Burgesses, among them Thomas Jefferson, submitted a resolution calling for June 1 to be set aside as a day of fasting and humiliation for this and every injury to American rights. Lord Dunmore, the royal governor of the province, promptly dissolved the House. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for supporting with manly firmness. That's starting to have a familiar ring to it, doesn't it?
It's funny when you read, even just like right here, the history of the Revolution in the First Continental Congress, of what they're talking about, what their grievances were. And then you look at today's time and it's like, okay, this is 1773, 1774.
Right.
Okay. Then you go back to like 1215. What was going on in 1215? Some of the same
shit
stuff.
Yeah. So that's why I say, this is not our first rodeo here, guys. So, and we're pissed about a little bit more than tea, just so you know, right? So, under the leadership of Patrick Henry, the members adjourned to the Raleigh Tavern, where they resolved to call for a general congress of the colonies to consider those measures which the united interests of America may from time to time require. They also summoned a special Virginia Revolutionary Convention for August 1st to decide what might be done to help the people of Boston and to elect delegates to the General or Continental Congress when it met in Philadelphia in September. Jefferson's constituents of, some Albemarle County, whatever, I don't even know if that's even still a place, elected him to represent them at the Virginia Convention. He drew up a draft of instructions in July, which he planned to lay before the members, hoping it might serve to guide the delegates at Philadelphia, right? The rule of law, right? So we're going to play by a set of rules here. The result was the summary view of the rights of the British America. While the Virginia Convention eventually rejected the view as too radical, imagine that, the effort established Jefferson's reputation as a revolutionary pamphleteer. Could that be like today's social media, a pamphleteer? Interesting, isn't it? A little bit of long forgotten trivia, pamphleteer, right? That would be us on doing this out on social media. Here's a letter from Thomas Jefferson, wrote to Monroe, June 17, 1785. Its soul, its climate, its equality, liberty, laws, people, and manners. My God, how little do my countrymen know what precious blessings they are in possession of, and which no other people on earth enjoy. Let that sink in just for a minute. You know, this was Thomas Jefferson in 1785. Wow. I had to throw that out there because it was relevant. But resistance and reprisal. A special convention of delegates from the counties of Virginia met at Williamsburg on August 1st, 1774. The convention agreed to an association for the cessation of trade with Great Britain, similar to the agreement adopted 2 months later by the Continental Congress. In addition, delegates for this first Congress were elected and given instructions printed below. Basically, it was how to disseminate the information, for kind of a lack of a better expression. So, this is absolutely not, like I said, this is not the first time we've done this. And this is not the first time our leaders have been under pressure from the people to deal with this frickin' bar association horse shit. So, let's do Joseph Galloway's A Plan for the Union of Great Britain and the Colonies. Okay. To solve the difficulties with Great Britain, Joseph Galloway of Pennsylvania proposed a plan of union to become, union in the Continental Congress that had convened in Philadelphia in September 1774. Though favorably received by many delegates, the plan was defeated by a 6-5 vote of colonies. 6-5 vote. Imagine that. It was the sudden arrival of news concerning the resolutions passed in Suffolk County, Boston, Massachusetts, that turned sentiment away from this effort at compromise. Right? We tried to work with them. They're not going to compromise. They're not going to budge. Again, sounding familiar here. 6 years later, Galloway reminisced on the fate of this plan, which he is reprinted here. While the two parties in Congress, which were at that time the Loyalists and the Republican, Loyalists being loyal to Great Britain, obviously, just so those of you out there who don't know that, remained thus during 3 weeks on an equal balance. He wrote in 1780, the Republicans were calling to their assistance the aid of their factions without continual expresses were employed between Philadelphia and Boston. These were under management of Samuel Adams, a man who, though by no means remarkable for brilliant abilities, yet is equal to most men in popular intrigue and the management of a faction. In other words, he had a pretty good military mind. It was this man who, by his superior application, managed at once the faction in the Congress at Philadelphia and the factions in New England. Whatever these patriots in Congress wished to have done by their colleagues without, to induce General Gage, then at the head of His Majesty's army at Boston, to give them a pretext for violent opposition or to promote their measures in Congress. Now that sounds like lobbying, doesn't it? Mr. Adams advised and directed to be done, and when done, it was dispatched by express to Congress. Post, right? Served, gotta be served. By one of these express came inflammatory resolves of the county of Suffolk, which contained a complete declaration of war against Great Britain. Ooh. Somebody was a little more than slightly miffed, right? So don't know what happened there, but if there was going to be a declaration of war, it's like, ooh, okay. Declaration and resolves of the Continental Congress. After rejection of the Callaway Plan of the Union of the Continental Congress in October 14, 1774, adopted the following declaration of colonial rights. This is where we start getting back into rights again. Major John Sullivan, delegate from New Hampshire, drafted the resolutions. The Congress voted to reconvene the following year unless the grievances set forth in the declaration were settled. How many times have we said it? When we lay down the law, you lay it down through declarations, right? You are walking in and declaring your right, right? Your standing, your status, your standing, jurisdiction, whatever. But it is your right to do that. This is where this stuff comes from. So, this might seem like it's, anything other than just kind of a refresher, but these are actually great conversation starters, because when you go through and you kind of know these little bits and pieces of history, you'd be surprised how many members that are in there don't. Right? You can say, back, we had this same conversation in 1773 and 1774, First Continental Congress, blah, 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 blah. They'll be like, what? Yeah. So, you may think this is irrelevant trivia, but it's not. Anything you can do to make these people understand that you're not, number one, you're not a moron. And number two, you're not going away and you're going to make them follow due process of law, whether they like it or not. And because we know that we've had this conversation before, right? Hence these bar members sitting in Congress giving us this same shit that we've been dealing with, right? So most members of the First Continental Congress hoped that a commercial boycott would influence the British government to accede to their demands. On October 20, 1774, the Congress voted for non-importation, non-consumption, and non-exportation, virtually cutting off trade with Britain. They stacked them off, baby. It was hoped that this economic maneuver would bring about repeal of the intolerable acts. Remember those intolerable acts that they had, one of them was the Quartering Act. The non-intercourse agreement differed from previous colonial boycotts in so much as it derived from the people working through committees rather than from the merchants themselves, right? This was the representatives. This wasn't just a bunch of store owners that got together and said, we're going to do this, right? So the Continental Association was perhaps more successful politically than economically, since it helped to weld the colonies together into an American Union. Wow. So I said, this is where it starts to really start to get interesting about, you got a bunch of ragtag, business people getting together to, kind of lay the law down. This is the stuff that we're not going to put up with. Remember, this is all about tea now. So, not to put too fine a point on that, we're talking about tea here. So John Jay of New York favored effective central government in the interests of the merchants and property owners. He supported the colonial cause, although he deplored violence in the quarrel between Great Britain and America, hoping until the eve of independence for reconciliation with the mother country. As a member of the First Continental Congress, Jay was appointed in October 1774 to draft the following address stating the rights of the colonists in a spirit of modernization and conciliation. Wow. I'm sorry. A spirit of moderation. So, again, when your gut tells you that, hey, look, I got to be reasonable here. You're not the only ones. Your ancestors felt exactly the same way. So these principles, these founding principles, maxims of law that we refer to them now, these go back to the very beginning, right? So again, this is not new. You're not crazy for feeling the way that you feel, right? So that's kind of the importance of when we say stand your ground. This is what we're talking about right here. This is what stand your ground looks like. So so I say it's interesting to watch this stuff play out. On the depravity of kings and the sovereignty of the people. Okay, well, this is good. This is going to kind of get interesting a little bit here. Fearing the loss of the popular support and the collapse of organized opposition to Britain, the delegates to the Continental Congress of 1774 could not openly express their desire for independence. Newspaper writers, however, who could remain anonymous, did not hesitate to affirm their goal of independence. Right? We're working towards independence. We're tired of this crap. The following newspaper article of November 14 would seem to indicate that popular opinion was moving far in advance of the conciliation documents produced by the Congress. I'm sorry, the conciliatory documents produced by Congress. So, that's why I say, the sentiment of the people through anonymous social media, right? At that time, it was newspapers. What was that? Pamphleteer, I think, was the term used earlier in the book. So ironic that would be us Facebookers and YouTubers now. We're pamphleteers.
Mm-hmm.
Proposals for manufacturing. Despite the attempts at reconciliation with Britain, the outbreak of hostilities seemed inevitable by the end of 1774. The various colonies were prepared for war by collecting arms and ammunition and encouraging local manufacturers. In October, the Assembly of Massachusetts, dissolved by Governor Gage, met at Concord as a provincial congress and took over the government of the colony. Ooh, interesting. It appointed a committee of safety to collect guns and ammunition and organize select militia, Minutemen, right, for immediate action. The following resolutions were adopted by that Congress on December 8th. By the end of 1775, almost every colony had adopted similar resolutions. One of the reasons I chose this passage, one of my letters to the president, I cited the Minutemen. This is where I got that citation from, was this book. So, so to say that these things don't exist in our history, in our form of government, this goes back to the First Continental Congress, guys. So Maryland endorses resistance. Okay, this is where we start to, form that more perfect union. On December 12, 1774, the deputies of the province of Maryland met in Annapolis. The following report of their meeting constitutes an endorsement of the Association of the Continental Congress in resolving to form a provincial militia. The Maryland delegates went beyond the express recommendations of Congress. They said, you know what, we're going to do this. We don't care if you like it or not. So Samuel Seabury, the controversy between Great Britain and her colonies, in spite of the intolerable acts, Samuel Seabury and other Tories devoted their literary efforts to keep the colonies loyal to the crown. Seabury was signed his pamphlets, a Westchester farmer, by the way, tried to convince the colonists that their greatest freedom and good lay in their submission to British rule. Sound like somebody recently. People need to submit to an all-powerful sovereign. Remember when Obama stood up there and said that shit in the other, wherever it was he was? God, wish somebody had stepped up and shot his ass when he did that. That was treason, right? He believed the Americas could secure the changes they wanted through peaceful and orderly petitions to Parliament. The following selection, dated December 24, 1774, was a letter in reply to the anonymous author of a pamphlet that had taken the other side. So, just kind of a way to go into, and of course, remember the Republicans and the Loyalists, and there was always the Loyalists were trying to, there's always that side that is afraid to let go and dive in with both feet, right? The difference between the order makers and the order takers. At that time, the order makers, right, the Republicans, the ones who wanted their freedom and their liberty, they weren't putting up with this crap. So, from Daniel Leonard, The Dangers of Rebellion, the case for submission to British Crown was argued in Massachusetts by Daniel Leonard, a wealthy and aristocratic lawyer. Here we go again. In a series of weekly letters addressed to the inhabitants of Massachusetts Bay, which were published in Massachusetts Gazette under the pen name of Massachusettsness, this Thursday, whatever that is, between December of 1774 and April of 1775. Leonard's real sympathies were probably always with the Tories, but in 1769, upon his election to the General Court, with the apparent ear for popular opinion, he had spoken strongly in opposition to the king. At the urging of Governor Thomas Hutchinson, he definitely sided with the Tories in 1774, and thereby secured for himself an appointment in the provincial government. The letter that follows is number 5 and appeared on January 9, 1775. So, again, we just go through and we talk about, it's the same stuff that we're writing, right? Almost identical to the stuff that we're writing. That's why I was like, this is like scary and stuff. So, now, one of the things that we've talked about, right? Could get into a little bit. I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit. The difference between Mason's rule and Jefferson's rule books. Okay. John Adams even speaks to this, the rule of law and the rule of men. So, knowing and understanding that there is a difference, as a result of the resolutions of protest against the Stamp Act, that he had written for the town of Braintree, Massachusetts, Adams was already identified by 1774 with a patriotic cause. He was therefore selected as a delegate to the First Continental Congress at Philadelphia in that year. Upon his return to read the letters by Massachusetts of Daniel Leonard in the Massachusetts Gazette, arguing the Loyalist point of view, though he did not then know who the author of the letters was, Adams prepared letters of his own in reply, of which the following appeared in the same paper on February 6, 1775, under the pen name of Novangulus. I guess that's how you pronounce that.
Say that one 3 times fast.
Yeah. Novangulus. Right. So pen names, again, not an old habit. He had not yet come to believe in complete independence, as the letter shows. The remarks that he quotes in order to refute them are all those of Massachusetts. So, and no, I'm not going to try to say that guy's name again. So, Massachusetts, and it's fun. So, here's a name you guys will probably know. Edmund Burke on Conciliation with America. Let's see here. To reconcile British superiority with American liberty will be my great object. Edmund Burke told his constituents of Bristol in 1774, and this may be regarded as a purpose of his famous speech on conciliation with America, reprinted here in part, which was delivered to the House of Commons on March 22, 1775. The occasion was the belated proposal by Lord North's ministry, there's that ministerial army again, to exempt from taxation any colony that would voluntarily undertake some of the expenses of civil and military rule. Because the amounts of such expenditures were not specified, and because the moment the colonies were under subjection by force, Burke thought this proposal ignominious. So, a method of ransom by auction. That's basically what he was talking about. He believed that Parliament had the right to tax the colonies, but the right was not worth insisting upon at the cost of military suppression. Now, we talk about one of that conduct of a tyrant. He has attempted to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power, right? That conduct of a tyrant. Edmund Burke saw this coming. That's the reason I posted this. So, Patrick Henry, this is where I actually did take this section because this is one of my favorite parts of the book. This is his give me liberty or give me death speech. So, like Samuel Adams, his counterpart in Massachusetts, Patrick Henry, dominated the assembly of his province for 10 years before independence was declared. Repeatedly, he overcame the doubts of more cautious leaders, the Randolphs, Pendletons, Harrisons, Careys, and Braxtons, with the eloquence that made him a legend. Unhappily, some of his best speeches were never taken down, but survive only as were remembered. This is the case with what was perhaps the greatest of them, his address on March 23, 1775, to the convention that gathered in Richmond after Lord Dunmore suspended the Virginia Assembly. The speech is best known for in the Reconstruction Act, right? This even bringing this forward, reprinted here by Henry's early biographer, William Wirt, originally published in 1817. Its last paragraph is among the 2 or 3 most famous perorations in American history. Is it that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir. It will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with those warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to have a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array? If its purpose be not to force us into submission, can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain an enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. You gonna live over there, bro?
Oh, that one's not me.
Oh, all right.
That's my helping hand over here.
I gotcha. Okay. He has, let's see here. Can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain an enemy of this, in this quarter of the world call for these accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has not. She has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet upon us chains which the British ministry have been so long forging. And what we have, what have we opposed to them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Oh boy, who does that sound like? Have we anything new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light of which it is capable, but it has been all in vain. Shall we resort to entreaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not been already exhausted? Let us not beseech you, sir, deceive ourselves longer. Sir, we have done everything that could be done to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, there's that word again, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne and have implored its interposition to arrest the tyrannical heads of the ministry and parliament. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances have produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt from the foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. That's where I said this is my favorite speech. There is no longer any room for hope. If we wish to be free, if we mean to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges for which we have been so long contending, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, and which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our contest shall be obtained, we must fight. I repeat, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all that is left us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with formidable and adversity. But when we shall, but when shall we be stronger? We will be the next weak or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed, and when a British guard shall be stationed at every house? Shall we gather strength by um, irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying um, supinely on our backs and our hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall have bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means which God of nature has placed in our power. 3 million, I'm sorry, yeah, 3 millions of people armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such country as that which we possess, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is just God who presides over the destinies of nations, and who will raise up our friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. If we were based enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat, but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat, sir, let it come. It is vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is that gentleman's wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, he cried, both his arms extended aloft, his brows knit, every feature marked with the resolute purpose of his soul, and his voice swelled to its boldest note of exclamation, give me liberty or give me death. He took his seat. No murmur of applause was heard. The effect was too deep. After a trance of a moment, several members started from their seats. The cry, "To arms!" seemed to quiver on every lip, gleam from every eye. So that's kind of the short version of the give me liberty or give me death speech. This leads us to just a couple more slides here. I'll go into due process, but this goes into the preamble of the Massachusetts Articles of War, right? Because we have to declare it. So in February 1775, a second Massachusetts Provincial Congress met to prepare for war. It directed the appointed generals to oppose the British by force if necessary. Directions were also given to gather such military stores as could be procured. On April 5, the Congress adopted 53 articles of war, to which the following preamble was affixed. So, so shortly thereafter, John Adams, the formation of new state governments, right? They were determined, they wanted the powers within the states. The people had the power. The people wanted representation, right? Equal representation under the law. 1775, just saying. Most of the colonies in 1775 were still operating under their original charters. As relations with Britain deteriorated, several colonies appealed to their Continental Congress for aid in forming new state governments. John Adams, in the autobiography he wrote many years after these events, recalled that Congress neither claimed nor offered any leadership in this matter, but referred to each state back to its own constituents. The new state constitutions that were devised during the Revolution were not the result of popular democratic movements, but were produced by those who already held positions of authority to provide the political unity necessary to fight the war with England. So those constitutions were not of the people, by the people, for the people. So hence the reason that language appears in ours as it is today. As to pay, sir, I beg to assure the Congress that as no pecuniary consideration could have tempted me to this is George Washington's speech, by the way, could have tempted me to accept this arduous employment at the expense of my domestic ease and happiness. I do not wish to make any profit from it. I will keep an exact account of my expenses. Those, I doubt not, they will discharge, and that is all I desire. Boy, who does that sound like? Doesn't that sound a lot like Trump? Just saying.
I don't know.
This was George Washington's answer to Congress on his appointment as Commander-in-Chief, June 16, 1775. He said, you don't have to pay me for this job. This is my job. This is my country. And your favorite document, I couldn't leave it out. The necessity for taking up arms. I know this is Kirk's favorite document, so I had to put it in here.
One of my all-time favorites right here, folks.
A declaration setting forth the causes and necessity of their taking up arms held out a hope of a reconciliation with Britain, but at the same time approved the use of armed resistance to obtain recognition of the rights of the colonies. The final draft of the declaration was the work of Thomas Jefferson and John Dickinson, approved by the Second Continental Congress on July 6, 1775. The declaration disavowed all thoughts of independence. The colonists claimed to be fighting a ministerial army, not the king, who they felt had been misled by evil counselors. The Americans promised to lay down their arms when the liberties they claimed as a birthright had been secured. So they said, you knock off your crap, we'll quit shooting you, right? So that's pretty much the short version of that. So that kind of leads us into
that's where those easy emoluments of statutable plunder come in.
That's right. So
that's where that's from.
That's right. So knowing this history and knowing the significance behind the emoluments clause, as far as this constant interference from this fourth pillar, this ministerial army, right? It goes into Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, that they're, you've heard it referred to as the title of nobility clause. And the subsequent 13th Amendment that is used in conjunction with it. So when people asked me, Why do I associate these two things together? That history that I just read to you is expressly why I associate these two things together. So, I know that was kind of a long-winded explanation, but sometimes there's only one way to explain it, and that is just to explain it, right? So that is the pretty much it in a nutshell as to us dealing with these foreign actors, foreign emoluments, foreign pillars of law, right?
Wouldn't that be that, I don't know, Esquire?
Right? So, this is why when I say, you've been scammed by the useful bar idiots, those confidence game and their confidence game and trickery and snake oil salesman and confidence man and all that other horse shit with their entitlement programs and their benefit bar card. That's an emolumentum. That is a foreign emolument. It is not Republican in character or form, but this is the Democrats' model, their business model. And this is where they get those stipends, those public sector government contractors, or those monopolies, right? Remember when I was talking about a history of going after monopolies? This is not an old concept, ladies and gentlemen. This is very, this is so old it's new again, right? So that's what leads me back to go back through and do the entire etymology on the word, test it in the courts as to where it is today, which I've done, and we walked in with the proper jurisdiction. So we established status, we established standing, and we've established jurisdiction. The first principle only requires that we have jurisdiction, but we established status and standing to go right along with jurisdiction when we walked into Congress to assemble this quorum, because we knew damn well what we were impeaching was the oldest argument known to America, right? So that's why when we look at what a de jure republic is, well, we know what its format is, right? Inside is jurisdiction 1, outside is jurisdiction 2. And in commerce, these are those legal maxims, are those principles, those characteristics that give that corporation character, right? This is what a de jure republic would look like in proper character and form, that every one of us who do this job actually recognize. So that's expressly one of the reasons why I went ahead and said, you know what? I know what they're going to say about diagrams and business models, the same crap they say every other time. So, again, acting as a friend of the court, we go in and we present our remonstrance. So this particular one is Nate's. So when these particular actors who were in government, they saw this word. They also knew, again, by now I've established myself as a formidable force to be reckoned with as far as the courts were concerned. Just to be granted standing alone to do this job was it became a topic of conversation. Why in the hell is this guy? This is not just about child support. There's something behind this. This guy's got a bug up his ass and a legitimate gripe. So, if all he wants to do is come in here and make a presentation, and he has forgotten all this, he knows more about this history than every one of you people combined, you need to sit down, shut up, and let this man talk. And that's pretty much kind of the short version, right? Our repeated petitions have been met by repeated injury, right? Remember from the Declaration of Independence? So again, it's, that petition, the Nate's, there's this one and the federal court orders that went with it. This one here, as we used what we'd already gained to enter Neely in, And so now we can get into due process, right? So now we're up to speed. So we have our petitions, we have all of our history, we have our jurisdiction. Okay. We know what we're doing, we know how we're doing it, we know why we're doing it. We've got a plan that dates back to the original 1773, for God's sake. So so to go into this thing citing all of this history, and these guys are looking at me like, who in the hell is this guy? You know, I'm used to this. Believe me, I'm used to it. So let's see here. Another comment. Somebody asked me, did Trump mess up or what? No, I don't think Trump messed up. That's never heard of. That's not. That was never a consideration for me. So let's go through the motions. Remember the first 5 and subsequent subcategories of number 5.
Okay, so this is getting into answering the questions out there about how to take things to Congress. Pay attention. Here you go.
Right. So you've prepared your remonstrance, your document, right? And you want to enter that into a quorum. Well, you have to have a motion, right, that supports the document. So what motion? So let's start with incidental motions. Is it an appeal? Is it a point of order? Is it a parliamentary inquiry and like requests for information? Or for something for orders of the day? Okay. And to get proper standing, subject matter jurisdiction under all this shift made up, it was not easy to do. So requests or motions for leave to withdraw a motion or question is under consideration. So again, you can go down through these, as many as you want. I'm going to give you the most common ones. For example, if you've got an issue with somebody presenting, that's on page 36 and 37 Roman numerals of the of Mason's manual. So those of you out there who have asked me this several times, what do we do about this vaccine bullshit? Well, that would be a number 23. You want a motion to postpone indefinitely, right? So, and that could be pending the outcome of a study that has just begun that may take 5 years, right? So you can give, especially with stuff, sciences that are not exact, something that is opinionated like that, you can give 95 reasons to postpone as opposed to their one reason to pass, which is money, right? So, just kind of keep that in the back of your thought as you are considering if you want to challenge vaccines or any of that medical garbage. But there's a bill out there already and you want to postpone it indefinitely. That would be a number 23. Main motions, have been through this. Main motions, questions to present a bill, resolution, or other substantive proposition for passage, adoption, approval, or rejection. Okay, so this is the most common motion used once a quorum is assembled. Okay, you'll exchange motions back and forth with members of the quorum or other witnesses even. I mean, it's hard to say. It's been so long since anybody's actually done this the correct way. Nobody knows how to do it, hence what's going on in Washington. So, this is the list, but I would say of these, 23, 24, 39, and 40 are going to be your most common. And here's why. Because most of this crap, these forced adoptions and all this bullshit, you want it expunged. You want your kids back. You want your property back, whatever it was they stole from you. So the thing you have to do is you have to expunge their SMU, right? You got to wipe that off the record. Give me my life back, you dirty bastard, right? You claimed and exercised a power and pillars of law that ain't lawful. That's shit made up. That's doing something you don't have the power to do. So, when I talk about a lot, especially Congress giving away powers it doesn't have. There's the two examples right there. Implementations of two pillars of law that are definitely would be considered acts of treason if you consider in the beginning we went to war over tea, for God's sakes. So that's why I said let this sink in for just a minute, right? So knowing and understanding that the petition of remonstrance being cited in that book, in that history, was the last straw before we went to war. Okay, telling them this history, or reminding them of history, somewhere in context of your document, you'll see that I do that frequently. There's a reason for that. You know, I'll cite something of, yeah, we faced something like this. It was called Vietnam, or yeah, we faced something like this. It was called Korea, you know, or Desert Storm, or, you know, or whatever. So in other words, you know, you're letting them know that, number one, you're no slouch. You've taken your time. You've done your homework. And when you cite some piece of history like that, you'd be surprised how many times they're going to pick that book up. Where the hell is that book? He keeps mentioning that damn book. And they'll go pick that sucker up and they'll go, holy shit, this guy was right. Maybe I need to reconsider my position. Yeah. So now there's two schools of thought here. Part 9, sessions and meetings, chapter 72, sessions of state legislatures and calls for special sessions. So if we talk about peaceable assembly, right? They're out doing their job. They're not in session. You want to call them into assembly. Okay. This section of the book, section 780, is what does that. This is the mechanics behind assembling your quorum, assembling your legislature. So these opening sentences are obviously for governor usage, especially with here in Florida, for example, where we have a lot of hurricanes and, you know, gubernatorial emergency provisions, right, for, you know, hurricane relief or whatever, you know, whatever's going to happen. So going to go into, let's see here. There was one sentence in here that was, here we go. Number 9. When the Constitution prohibits passage of legislation not included in the governor's call, legislation passed at a session at a special session not with the call is not valid, even if it is subsequently signed by the governor. So I said there are little bits and pieces in here. So if you can go back and you can look at the legislative process of how maybe something kind of got forced through, like, oh yeah, Obamacare, yeah, we got to pass it before we can read it. Yeah, bullshit, right? So, you know, that would be, you know, number 9 would be a good provision to cite in context of making that argument. So, you know, let us see here. It is only when both houses are lawfully assembled that they can constitute the legislature of a state. Interesting point, right? So, you know, are you going to talk about a committee on one side, or are you going in for a vote, right? And what constitutes a quorum, Kirk? What wasn't it?
A minimum of a majority. Constitution dictates the quorum.
That's right. That's right.
A majority of them assembled in order to have a quorum.
Right. And that's in both houses, right? Just what it just says right here, both houses. So if both houses are not assembled, how can they claim that they did anything lawfully?
Bingo.
Right? You know, that's why I said somebody ain't following the rules here. Not even the ones in the book. You know, to say nothing about, you know, the statutes. So the and of course let's see here. Here we are. State constitution or statutes often include provisions whereby a legislature may call itself into special session. Well, again, would that be by petition of remonstrance? Article 1, claim and exercise of a right? So, you know, this is where you would cite this kind of stuff and where you find it. By the way, this is page 554 in the Mason's Manual. And the rest of the section just goes on of adjournment of legislative session. So I won't go into, how they get themselves out of work. So, but joint sessions. Okay, here's joint sessions. And this is actually kind of interesting. The two houses of the legislature may have the right to sit in joint session for certain purposes, but the right to sit, the right so to sit is limited. Constitutional right cannot be augmented by the legislature. So in other words, they can't use their office for as an advantage for a personal benefit. Advance an agenda that is not constitutional, for example. Right. So again, skip adjournment. That's shmew. So sessions open to public. I've been asked about this several times and in several emails. So I'm going to cover this. Most states have provisions in their constitutions, statutes, and rules that require that the doors of each house shall be open to the public during its session, other than when secrecy is required. Right? Here in Florida would be, we have the Coast Guard has to go brief Congress for whatever the reason. So I wanted to make sure I covered that because that was a question that came up in email several times. Now we go into investigations and public order. Right? We've talked about this. I've thrown these, demands for investigations, right? And I'm throwing these suckers out there like friggin' Hershey's has M&Ms, right? So I'm doing it as fast and as best as I can, but because of so many of you, and so it takes so long to write some of these things. Some of these cases are pretty complicated, especially when we get into real property, banking, long involved contractual transactions. Those kinds of cases really take some time. I mean, you got to dig and dig and dig. So the right of a legislative body to make investigations in order to assist in the preparation of wise and timely laws must exist as an indispensable incident and auxiliary to the proper exercise of legislative power. There it is right there. What is the proper exercise of legislative power? They can make no law that will lessen or abridge the rights of the people. So the definition of positive law has to be if somebody has a grievance to go in there and petition their representatives. Again, you don't need a bar member to do this. This is why the bar hates me so much. So, right? So,
how unfortunate.
So,
we all kind of hate the bar.
Right?
So,
feelings mutual.
Feelings mutual.
So, but the whole thing about this is, we're talking about the proper exercise of legislative power. Examples of those pretended acts of legislation that when the bar came in and said, we're taking over, right? And then, of course, they came in with their 1995 with their one world government bullshit and, Sharia law and all that garbage. Hell, I was at work during that time frame. Jesus. So, I I was still getting my feet wet, learning how to do all this shit. So, I was developing my skill set at that time. So, let's see. You got here. Let's see. The power and duty reposed in the legislature and each and every member of both houses thereof is that of preparing and proceeding to enact wise and well-informed and needful laws, and in the preparation of such laws, the necessity of investigation of some sort must exist as an indispensable incident. Right? So if they're going to make positive law, return your kids, and make that positive law that is enforceable, okay, that requires an investigation. That's number 3 right here. So this is why I say to know it, we're not bound to know it. They're bound to know it. So the fact that we're teaching you guys the stuff that they're bound to know, and they're going, what's a Mason's manual? You see kind of the conundrum that I'm suffering here at the expense of all of this. So, you know, and of course, you know, judges are now standing there laughing, going, see, I told you these people were going to be pissed. So, yeah. Anyway, you know, and of course, my favorite one, number 10, an investigation into the management of the various institutions of the state and the departments of the state government is at all times a legitimate function of the legislature. How many times have you heard this? I can't get involved. That's not my jurisdiction. Or, you know, that's a separation of powers issue. Blah, 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 blah. So, you know, it's every one of us have heard this stuff. So, you know, it's the fact that we can go to these sections in the book. Okay. This is where it becomes extremely important to be able to walk in and cite due process. So if you do end up in Washington, right, and you do end up having to consult a Jefferson's manual, those things, again, you can find one of those suckers on damn near every street corner, the way I understand it. So, you know, that wouldn't be a problem. I am going to order some of the other state books. It's an expense. I just don't have the money to put into it right now. So, but I am going to do that. And when I do that, I'll start citing differences. But right now is to teach the majority of you the best I can on how to get what your problem is into your state house. So if you do end up in Washington, nobody can say, you didn't follow due process of law. You didn't follow due process of law. The hell I didn't. I'm looking right at the book, dude. So, you know. So let's get into investigations respecting members. This is another hot button, especially with what's going on right now. Either house of the legislature has the power to investigate and institute an inquiry into the truth of an alleged bribery of any of its members or the members of a previous legislature connected with its legislative functions. In the exercise of such power, it must necessarily have the same power to compel the attendance of witnesses before it or before a committee and compel them to testify as in any other investigation. Now, this is significant. When we call any member of government to testify, it goes right into this section right here, right? We exercise our sovereign authority in the legislature. So if we want to call any actor from any branch, okay, not just the legislature is what's mentioned here, but if we want to call in another actor from another branch to do that, this right here is the section that we go into, and we can kind of pull some of that language and say, well, hey, if you guys can investigate each other, you can damn sure, as a co-equal branch of government, you can damn sure provide oversight over the executive or over the judiciary. You know, don't, not happening. Because if they're not going to provide oversight of their members, you know, remember that report that John and I did, 100% dismissal rate. Well, somebody's going to provide oversight over these bastards, whether you like it or not. And, you know, again, this is why the bar members whine and cry. Oh, I feel threatened. Yeah. How many times have you heard that, Kirk, since we started this?
Yeah, another one that I've heard is, oh, well, the Declaration of Independence isn't law. Okay. Considering law is that which is laid down, ordained, and established, which is what it says in Black's Law Dictionary. Didn't you go to law school?
That's what I said. I said, how do you read the Black's Law Dictionary? The Declaration isn't law. Christ, it's in the Black's Law Dictionary, you moron. Ooh, boy. Yeah. God, the bar hates this country. Britain's been trying to take this friggin' country apart since, since we kicked them out of here in the original 13th Amendment, the dirty bastards. So,
War of 1812.
yep. So,
I mean,
are we going to war again? I don't give a shit. Let's go.
Right there in the, Declaration of Arms, they talk about how, which I don't have that book here. I actually do have that book with me. That's one of my books I brought. Talks about ministerial army, right?
Right.
And you couldn't quite figure out exactly who it was. Well, it was the bar. They figured it out.
Right.
Well, crap, this is that ministerial army.
Right.
Get the bar out of here.
Right.
The Roman Catholic Church.
Uh-huh.
That's right. No.
Yeah, I just saw out there, Heather Perry. I don't know if you've got the ability to do screenshots. You can go back and rewatch this, you guys. The easiest way to do this, if you're on PC and you want to do screenshots of the screen, pull it up and do a full screen view and pause the video and hit the control print screen buttons at the same time. Then you go and you open up a Word document or, Paint document or something. And then you paste that screenshot either in a Word document or in a Paint, Windows Paint, whatever software you have. And you'll be able to save these screenshots directly from the videos. Thank you, Heather, for pointing that out. You're not the first person to tell me that I went too fast. Sorry. So there are limitations on right of a legislative body to investigate. Okay. In other words, they can't investigate the people. They can only investigate investigations in public order, those public offices that they created, right? You created this mess. You got to clean this shit up. I didn't make this mess. How many times did your mom tell you when you were a kid, pick up your damn Legos, kid? So guess what? If you don't think you're going to have to clean up your own mess, I'm going to call your mom. I'm going to make her come in here and kick your ass. So just so y'all know, that's where the power stands right there. This is not my first rodeo. So the method by an investigation or a method of investigation by a legislative body. This is where it starts to get a little interesting. The legislative arm of the government is not to be restricted in the exercise of the power of inquiry by the fact that methods and processes, judicial or quasi-judicial in character, are employed in the course of the inquiry. It is immaterial whether, in the exercise of that power, the legislative arm of the government is acting under or by virtue of granted or reserved authority. Now, when you file your petition of remonstrance, you're giving them the authority to go in there and smack the crap out of these guys if they need it, right? So there is benefit to, you got to acquiesce to something, right? You got to be reasonable here. Reason in law is the perfect equity. Or what the other particular constitutional limitations may be that separate legislative from judicial functions of government and that forbid the trespass of one of the domain of the other. So oversight is necessary, and it has happened in the past where the legislature will go out and literally embarrass the judicial into reversing a decision, especially if it's not politically popular. So, again, political coercion, it's nothing new. So, we get enough people together and we start getting enough of these quorums built, right? And I don't care if it's CPS, I don't care if it's, stealing real property, personal property. Again, the whole medical thing with the vaccines, I'm encouraging, practitioners, medical practitioners specifically, to get involved in those. I put out many requests through the American Medical Association, requests for just any preliminary opinions from any doctors or nurses that would have concerns about any one of these things. And I'm telling them that these will be presented anonymously into a congressional quorum. So if they have concerns for that, I will be more than happy to help them put those into a manner, commensurate with presentment, and get it before a quorum, or convene a new quorum if one doesn't exist. So we'll figure something out. So legislative investigating committees. This is where you guys really want to go after this, because were you talking about a committee or a subcommittee? Now, committees and subcommittees can be specialized or highly specially technical in nature, in character, or form. So this section right here really goes into participating in these committees, right? They're less than a quorum, but they're awesome for fact finding, working with people that are known professionals in that field, right? Again, talking about vaccines, you want to talk to somebody a doctor or a nurse or somebody who knows that stuff, talking to gearheads like Kirk or myself, other than the process, we're pretty much worthless. So, and I'm not ashamed to admit that, right? That's not one of my, cogs on the gears of my wheelhouse, right? So, in legislatures, the investigations of public matters before committees, preliminary to the legislature, or with the view of advising the House that appointed the committee, is a parliamentary usage, as well as established as as well as in England, right? And the right of either house to compel witnesses to appear and testify before its committees, and to punish for disobedience, has been frequently enforced, right? You want to walk in and this idiot is going to tell a lie. You can actually use a committee and point out their lies and hold them in contempt of Congress, right? So will contempt of Congress result in some form of relief and remedy? You bet your ass it's gonna, right? Because if they're going to lie to Congress, they're going to lie to the executive branch, and they're definitely this wouldn't be beneath them to lie to a judge. So, again, this is why when we go into the legislature, you got to make sure you have all your ducks in a row, and what you believe is not relevant, only what you can prove. All right, because number one, time is valuable there, and number two, by only going in there and talking about what you can prove, all you need to do is impeach two, 3 points of their case, and that's it. Their entire case falls apart right then and there in the committee. You don't even have to go outside of the committee and their case falls apart. So legislature can begin the positive legislative process to commence relief and remedy in the House and or the Senate, as far as maybe pulling some actors out of position of emolument, which is kind of what we want them to do anyway, right? Just saying. So this is why I say less can be so much more. Nate, thank you by the way, for beating that into my thick skull. Took you almost 2 years to do that, but you did it. So I want to say thanks again to Nate for doing that. So again, as a professional, as a gearhead, we want to go into all the science. How many times, Kirk? I gotta do the math on that. Wait a minute, got to check the resistance here. You get into that habit, and everything becomes longhand. So, it's just the nature and the inherent nature of my beast. So, anyway, this section right here, pages 568 and 569, Very important in the legislative process, continuing on 570. Testimony before a committee should be taken down for the information of the House, right? So obviously there's going to be a stenographer or somebody there who's going to take notes. Obviously it'll probably be, you know, unless there's matters of a sensitive nature, right? You know, somebody has something that is, you know, you want kind of be, you know, that's matters of a personal nature. That wouldn't go on video. That would be done by a stenographer or somebody who is, you know, can type it. So, witnesses in legislative investigations. By the common parliamentary law, a legislative body may compel the attendance of all persons as witnesses in regard to any subject on which it has power to act and into which it has instituted an investigation. The power of a state legislative body to compel witnesses to testify in aid of investigations is an attribute of the power to the legislature. I'm sorry, to legislate and follow as an essential implication. Okay, so again, to know these things is very important. Now, let's talk about some negative points, right? Because remember, we talk about the negative nexus, you know, the negatives and positives. Chances are, in your case, you're going to have something that was negative. It would reflect negatively on you. You know, did you get into a verbal altercation with your ex? You know, basically, was there a shouting match? Yes, committee members, I'm willing to admit we got into more than one shouting match, right? You know, one time I even punched the damn refrigerator or whatever, you know. I mean, you know, the Maytag repairman was happy, but that's about the extent of that damage. So, but, you know, anything other than that, you know, kind of as a way to get out in front of, because you know what the other side's going to say, you know, so why not, you know, get out there and get in front of some of the crap that you know they're going to throw at you. You know, some of those repetitive talking points that they always try to throw at you. So, you know, yes, is it when it comes to issues arguing over, you know, general household management, there's going to be some strife in there somewhere. You know, I think a reasonable person would say, yeah, that's normal, especially to the members who are married. So, you know, that question may not even become a question depending on how many members are married. So, anyway, this section, as far as you know, how to talk to the legislative body, you know, some things you might want to be prepared in, uh, you know, if even if you're going into a court and you're going to examine a witness, these are good points to know before you examine a witness, right? When any person is examined before a committee or at the bar of the House, any member wishing to ask the person a question must address it to the presiding officer, who puts the question to the person. If the propriety of the question is objected to, the presiding officer should direct the witness, counsel, and parties to withdraw, for no question can be moved or put or debated while they are there. Sometimes the questions are previously settled in writing before the witness enters. So, again, it behooves you to take some of those preliminary meetings, right? The meeting before the meeting. Number one, establish jurisdiction. See what types of agreements you can come to. Okay. Is that a form of arbitration? Could be. Tomato, tomato. But it shows that you're willing to at least be reasonable and negotiable. And it's not going to be one way or the other and everything on the favor of one side of this, right? That would be, you know, smew, for lack of a better expression. So, you know, in going into committees, preparing witnesses, good section to read on knowing how to talk to and prepare a witness. Compelling witnesses to attend and to testify, and the power to punish for contempt. You guys, again, I've been asked about this section again several times, page 572, 73, and I think it continues on 74. Compelling witnesses to attend, testify, and the power to punish for contempt. So, yes, you can hold them in contempt of Congress, and you can, incarcerate somebody for, let's see here. Let's just go down through a couple of these. Each house of the legislature may punish breaches of its authority when they are committed in its presence, and may equally punish witnesses or punish a witness for contempt of the House for the witness's refusal to appear or testify before a properly empowered committee, or to produce books and papers. Okay. The power of a house of a state legislature to punish a person for contempt can be exercised only in strict conformity with the rules of procedure that the laws of the state provide as a prerequisite to the validity of an adjudication of contempt. Okay, so that's why I say they can't just go around passing them out like Skittles, like these dumbasses do in these friggin', child support and other family court shit. Oh, you looked at me the wrong way. Contempt. Dude, you didn't follow due process here, right? So you want to go in there and you want to smack somebody around for a wrongful contempt action against you. Well, here's a good place to go in there and say, well, let's start with what they can do and go and work our way backwards, right? Reverse their reverse, right? So here's one. Witnesses cannot be punished for contempt before a legislature unless the matters inquired into are within the jurisdiction of the legislature. So let's look at that for just a second. You filed your petition of remonstrance, and you've already agreed that there are going to be some things that you're not going to discuss in open quorum, but the other side is going to try to bait you into an argument, and you petition for contempt against that other witness, right, for improper, for some kind of improper conduct. The difference between you and them is you are the one with the sovereign authority as one of the people in the legislature. They will be in a position of emolument, and yes, that includes you bar members too, by the way. So don't think you're going to get off easy on this one. So, you may have, the courts in your back pocket for whatever the reason, because you've got, they may be intimidated by you. I'm not intimidated by you. I will take your happy ass into the house and string you from a friggin' yardarm. Count on it. So, this is the section that allows you to do that. And this applies to persons in positions of emolument, public servants, right? The Constitution does two things. It creates government, but it also restrains government. The mechanism that does that is this book. So this is why we want you to know this stuff. So you can summon them to subpoena. In my case, for example, they are withholding this report that I've been bitching about for 10 years. So, that's a Brady violation, is it not? So, summon subpoenas and warrants. So you've been hiding this report. I've shown you evidence of the report. There's a cover page and a subsequent order that mandates what the report says. Where's the rest of the report? Don't tell me it doesn't exist. I got proof that it does. So this is where I want to go in, and I want to compel them to get that stuff and, validate my claim, right? This is what that means to to verify when you state your claim, your lawful claim, and you're going to mandate that that claim be verified so these actors can be prosecuted in court, that process will already be done. So again, there's more than one way to create your record or to fix the record. You know, errors and mistakes. Something was excluded that shouldn't be. Right. So, and there are many different types of
exculpatory evidence.
Right. Exactly. It'd be a Brady violation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Brady violation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there are special types of subpoenas, and I'm going to point this one out. A subpoena ducis tecum has been issued under statutory authority, showing that the purpose of the examination is within the scope of the inquiry authorized. The court cannot cancel the subpoena nor enjoin the issuance of any further subpoena. So when I said I want this freaking report that was created by an office of emolument, one of those agencies, right, that supported my side of the story, and the court's, you know, trying to refuse it, and it's like, no. Here's see section 802 number 4 right there. So, you know, I mean, it is what it is. This is why I said these are bits and pieces that reading the book has led me to do what I've done and why I've had such a measure of success doing this. So, writ of prohibition cannot be used to prevent an administrative or legislative body from proceeding with an investigation, right? This was another question that got asked of me. Is there anything these guys can do, these actors in positions of emoluments in any branch, to quash one of your investigations? And the answer is no. Not even in so much as a writ of prohibition. So, you know, there can be warrants, subpoenas, etc., issued during during recess, are signed only by authority of specially given. Could that be something like a governor's warrant? Right? Because once the investigation is ordered, right, and the executive branch is conducting that investigation, so could that be signed by the sheriff? Could it be signed by the governor? Could it be signed even by a judge, for that matter? For all we know, depends on the circumstances of the case. you know, it's not all corruption is directly related to government. There is plenty of corruption out there in some of these real estate cases that I'm finding. They've got these triads. You know, they've got these real estate brokers, they've got these lawyers, and there's usually a builder or some contractor of some form that's involved in them. And, you know, that's why I said I'm finding these patterns, right? And these quorums are getting assembled. So we're looking for all these red flags. Do these conditions exist in their transactions? Pick a type, right? Or everything from a banking transaction to a real property transaction and everything in between, right? You know, is there any kind of funky business going on downtown here, right? So, and of course, Section 803, right of investigating committees to sit between sessions. So if there's another committee member who's on another committee who may have either relevant questions for your committee for something that is going on in their committee, you're going to see a lot of that. They're going to back and forth. Look at what Jim Jordan just did. Jim Jordan in Washington just transferred from judiciary over to House Intelligence, right? So there's an example of how they will go between committees because of something relevant that they're working on at any given moment. So don't be surprised if you see that happen. You know, an occasional new face will pop up and then disappear. Totally normal. Totally normal. So, and again, this is what it means when we cite the frauds in the process. This is an old slide, I think. Yeah, this was an old slide. We talked about, coining money, weights and measures, and all of that stuff. So don't ask me how that managed to work its way back in there. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know I tried to get a lot of information into that, into this PowerPoint, because it is that type of thing is, it's critical in so much as a multitude of reasons. Let me go over here and get screen share stopped. Whoops. So, one of the main, again, this is, like I said, there was a lot of history in there, and I know a lot of you are probably out there going, why in the hell is he literally reading from the book? Well, in order to know and understand where these things come from and how to properly exercise them, you're going to have to assume the same role that I've assumed. I'm literally having to instruct, in every sense of the word, instruct, not just the process, but the history behind the process and why no bar member can do this job. Because it's the bar member's fault that I'm sitting here. I would be doing other things because trust me, I've got 1,000,007 other things I'd rather be doing than sitting here bothering you, Mr. Senator or Mr. Congressman. So, again, it is taking these bits and these pieces, taking the time to learn this stuff. So when you go in, you can make an intelligent, you can make an intelligent argument. You can make an intelligent presentation, including the conversation. Remember the meeting before the meeting? A lot of this stuff you're going to cover in those meetings before the meetings. You'd be surprised how much this stuff comes up, because they're going to test you. Don't think they won't test you. They want to know, what do you know? How do you know it? Where does your research come from? And how really committed are you to this thing? Because if you're not that committed to it, if you're just trying to play some kind of a shenanigan game on them, they're going to see right through that, man. So, just know and understand that being able to prove what you put forward is, again, fundamental in principle. But, knowing where this stuff comes from, it only just further supports your position, because chances are the other side ain't going to know it. So, unless, of course, they're watching me and Kirk. I mean, nowadays, bro, you never know.
There's quite a few people that are watching, from what I'm hearing firsthand. So,
right. So,
yeah.
Again, that was not my normal PowerPoint. I wanted to specifically do that one just for,
That's pretty good for Monday Night Law.
Right. So, again, for little man in your history project, I hope that helped. I hope that little presentation gets you through your history project too, by the way. So, but knowing and understanding that these things have origins, and these arguments are not old arguments. I mean, I'm sorry, they are old arguments. It's not the first time we've had this argument. So, when these guys go in there and you're saying, look, we're having the same problem, and even take a copy of the book with you, like I do sometimes, and flip open to the page number, right? That was one of the things that was actually, that section on monopolies was instrumental in helping me figure out how to articulate, and, in Nate's remonstrance, the section on perpetuities and monopolies, contrary to the genius of a free government, Article 1, Section 26 of the Texas State Constitution. So, yes, it's scary that I know that off the top of my head, but that's one of the 7 danger signs. I've been doing this too damn long. So, and I've spent way too much time with Nate reading his Constitution.
This particular manual here,
right?
Okay, you can only get this at ncsl.org. This is the only place you can get this book.
I have heard of some people selling them used. I don't know how much truth there is in that, but I have heard of it. Yeah. So again, you can hunt and peck if you want, but the only real true source is what Kirk just showed you.
The thing is there's a blue one out there that the picture looks almost the same color.
Right.
The picture, but it's blue, and it's an older version.
Yeah, it's not the right one.
Black one is the one you want, because that's the latest edition. Now, they'll be coming out with a new one here shortly.
Right.
So, 1953 version is in PDF.
Right.
And it has a lot of the same stuff, but this is the new updated version, and see, it has all the new case law stuff in it, is what it is.
Right.
So,
Doug says, this is the first time I stayed awake in history class out on Facebook. Love you, bro. So, yeah, it's, that's why I said, I knew this one was going to be a little long tonight, but there's a method to the madness. You got to know how these things work and why. So, this way you can focus on the how, right? You're focused more on the substance that's in the book, because you're going, damn, where did all this stuff come from? I did it. I'm the first one to admit that I did it. I just happen to have, the history right here behind me, that I could go back to it and refer to it. And I know a lot of you guys don't have that luxury. So, again, that's one of the reasons why I don't mind doing stuff like this, because, just because I know it, I wasn't born knowing it, I had to learn it, same as you guys. So, that's, again, in instructing our representatives is paramount to making sure we get that done and get it done right. So, how about you, bro? Did you ever find that, information so we can help people get those letters out for,
Yeah, I did, but I am seriously burnt, tired. I've been going since early this morning.
You and me both.
Then down here at the office, we did some cleaning up today. We did the early show, the field report earlier today. I'm just tired, wore out.
I hear you.
So
maybe go out there and post it in the comments, or post it out.
I did go over it on the warrant and everything on the field report, but I have the law stuff. Well, there's statutes that they're referencing in their own paperwork, and it just exposes their fraud. So.
Right. So we are, and
the basic update is we're working on some paperwork, and as I mentioned earlier, people understand what a sting operation is.
Right.
So, I'm just going to leave it at that. Look at what Trump's going through. Believe it or not, a lot of that shit's all a sting operation to snare the bad actors.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
gotcha.
Basically, things aren't what they actually appear to be. Field is in jail. This is true. This is a fact.
Right.
But wasn't no. And now we have the evidence to prove who all is involved. Right?
Right.
Got lots of names.
Right.
So this is the key to understanding the bigger picture of what's going on, is the fact that we just itemized a whole bunch of bad actors that all conspired to make all this happen, right? And do you think they're going to get away with it? No.
No.
You'll see. He's doing fine. He's in good spirits, enjoying his time.
Mm-hmm.
He said he's actually feeling better, getting a clear mind, and
Yeah.
so
Pretty scary that, one of the side effect benefits of that, was to come out of it going, okay, now when I sit down and I start writing again, my head is clear and somebody's ass is in some serious trouble, because there's two dangerous things. Number one is me without my coffee, and number two is me with my coffee and a clear head. So if I've got my coffee and a clear head, somebody's in a metric shit ton of trouble. So that's yeah, been there, done that. So I get it. I understand. I'm just checking on some of the last minute here on some of the stuff on YouTube.
Tune in for Wednesday. I'll start the show off Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll go over the documents again, and I'll show you what I was going to show tonight. But
Right.
we're already 2 hours and 20 minutes into this show tonight, and I am beat.
Yeah.
And I'm hungry. So much love to all y'all out there. I appreciate, oh man, I just had so blown away with the amount of people that have come here to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Despite all the trolls, you're going to have trolls. Plain and simple. It's just what it is.
Hey, I look at it this way, dude. For number one, it's free advertisement. So,
yeah.
So we get the free advertisement out of it. And the second thing is, why is it that we can go to any page in any book in history and show you what it comes from, where it comes from, and why, and how it works and why it works? So that's kind of the difference between us and them. So the more they troll, the funnier I think it is, because they're only just they're going to be the ones running smack face first into that brick wall.
What happened to ncsl.org? It does say 403 forbidden access is denied.
What you talking about, Willis? Did you type in www? I did that once and forgot to type in www, and it told me I was full of crap.
Okay, let me try that. Yeah, okay. But then it still goes to ncsl.org.
Yeah, that's why I said it was the weirdest damn thing I've ever seen. I don't know if it must be my browser or the settings or something like that. I don't know. It's bizarre.
I'm going to go find the book here real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a yeah, that's why I said I am going to order a Jefferson's manual. Again, it's one of those expenditures I don't have it right now because I've got so many cases that got to get out the door and get to respective state legislators as well as Washington. So,
okay, here we go.
But we are working on it, and the great thing is you guys doing this too. A letter, just some form of get your feet wet, kind of introduce yourself. Hey, look at it this way. It's cold as hell outside now. You can stand outside and hold a sign and freeze your ass off. Or or you can send them a letter and get an invite and go in and sit down and have a nice spot of tea with them. Pinkies up. So, oh, Jesus. Oh. Yeah, pass on that. Yeah, you can have that.
Real fill of -6, baby.
Ugh. Yeah. Oof. Ugh. Yes. For those of you trying to order directly from the website, I think they're having they may be having issues with their point of sale system, because I did get it from an inside source that there's more than one state legislator trying to get a copy of get their hands on a copy of the book. So, one mom I talked to said she picked up the phone and called and ordered it with her credit card over the phone, and she was able to get hers. So
now it says I clicked on order now. HTTP error 404. The requested resource is not found. I'm wondering if they're getting ready to put out the
new edition,
2020 edition, so they're not selling this no more.
Or they're just trying to sell them off, get them off the shelf to the legislators that are currently in office. Because I can promise you, unless the rumors that I'm hearing are true. Now, like I said, these are just rumors, so don't take this as gospel. But I've heard there's going to be an addition of a fiduciary capacity in this process of some form or fashion. So, I mean, if that's the way it's going to go, I think that would be perfect, because that would enable me to go in there and literally make this argument across the board, not just with the cases that I know about, but also for the cases that I don't know about. And it'll help us to, again, assemble that investigative team, that investigative quorum. So when we start looking through the systems, we'll know what the red flags are. When the red flags pop up in the programs, we'll know what those are and what they mean. I mean, because I know them, and I wrote a lot of the systems. I wrote the program. So I was like, I know those red flags. I've seen those before. So, and they're going, what the hell's a red flag? Oh, Jesus. My brain hurts.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So if you'd like to help support us out here, help pay the bills and support us in our endeavor, education, and everything else that we got going on behind the scenes, because this is what I do now. This is my daily job. So I'm going to put out our...
actually, I'll do the screen share of that slide from
PayPal.com. Oh, you got a slide for us. Perfect.
Yeah, I got a slide for it because we hadn't done that before. So did that come up okay? Can you see those all right? Let me go down here.
Yeah.
And see if I can make that a little bit bigger.
Of course, I'm on a big, huge screen. So.
Right. So, so there's Kirk _Pendergrass at hotmail.com. Why it underlined the whole thing, I have no idea. I tried to get it to quit doing that, and it wouldn't quit doing that. See?
That means a hyperlink.
Yeah. So, but you can't see the underscore between Kirk and Pendergrass, so it screws with that. But mine.
Oh, right.
Yeah. See?
There's an underscore between Kirk and Pendergrass for PayPal.
Right. So.
And then the Cash App is the $, capital K, capital P, lowercase EN 71. If you use Cash App.
Send me that, and I'll add that into this slide for the next time.
Okay. It's on the YouTube.
Oh, it is. Okay, good. I'll go in there and grab it and stick it in the slide here. So, again, in the spirit of, helping us get these cases in, as many of them as we can, because, there are the cases that you guys have heard about, and there are a lot of them that you haven't. And it's the ones that you haven't are the ones that really concern me, because those are matters of a personal nature. And that's just really all I can say about that. So, those ones, I want to get those in and get those handled as expediently as possible. So, and I'm working on it. So, but it's slow going when I got to work out there and then come in here and work in here and, so, but we'll get there.
All the information here is everything is in the description here. Mm-hmm. So PayPal for both Christopher and myself is in there, and our Teespring stores.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And of course the WordPress website, eclaws.org.
Yes. I need to make sure I make a slide for that next time. Thank you for reminding me. So. All right.
Well, thank you all. Make sure you do the like, follow, and share, subscribe, Facebook and YouTube. do the thumbs up, all the good stuff, share, share, share. This was actually a
Please.
really informative history lesson tonight. So uh, I love my history. I love that stuff because it tells us,
Yeah.
you know, what happened back then, what they did back then, and why they did what they did.
Right.
And it's basically, it just lays it out there. It itemizes it of all the tyranny, all the crap they were going through.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the difference between today and back then is communication. Where back then did they have the opportunity to have 674 people sitting here watching and learning all at once within 2 hours?
Exactly. You know, the best they could do was those
Man on a horse.
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, they would have to go in and they were what was that
This is how we're going to take back our nation.
right.
Because all political power is supposed to be inherent in the people.
Uh-huh.
So if we have that right to alter, reform, or abolish anything and any time we deem it necessary, we need to learn the process to do this. And it requires a little bit of reading. And you're in luck because we know a little bit about it. We're a little further down the road than most everybody else by almost 3 years.
Yeah, a couple, 2-3 years there anyway. So
now go eat and sleep. That's where I need to go.
yeah, I know. I hear you, brother.
It's been a long day already.
Right.
So,
but the good news, I mean, if nothing else tonight, you learned a couple of things. Number one, you're not crazy. And number two, this is not the first time we've had this argument in history. And, you know, as opposed to us just coming out here and talking about where we find it and all of that, I went ahead and made some scans again for, you know, Stephen's school project is probably the most important reason. But, you know, the point is, you know, you guys got to benefit from that because, you know, you can see it right from the freaking book. You know, we didn't make this stuff up. You know, we didn't just sit here and we're going to write a document. We're going to post it out there and say, go do this. Yeah, no, that's not what you do. You know, it's got to come from somewhere. It's got to have an origin point. And hey, what better origin point than to walk in with the book of the guys who are supposed to be doing that job and say, you know what you're supposed to be doing? I know what the bars told you you're supposed to be doing, but here's what you're supposed to be doing. Open your books to page and watch them turn the same color of white that board is. Because they seriously, the blood just drains from their heads. It's hysterical. So to everybody out there, thank you for your service on, you know, veterans, brother, you, Kirk and John, wherever you might be right now. Thank you guys for your service. Brian Lee, thank you for your service, and everybody else who may be on my friends list that I can't think of off the top of my head. Todd Szabo. We just lost a veteran, Navy veteran, just this year, Dave. Was a Cub Scout with me. Give me an idea how far back he and I go. So, Dave, to Dave's family, sorry for your loss. And, you know, Dave was a good guy. He's a good Navy man. So, on that, everybody, thank you for joining us on Monday Night Law. We'll see you back here on Wednesday.
Yep, we will see you on Wednesday night, folks. Much love to all y'all.